Okay, chapter 4, still in culture and religion in Eurasia and North Africa. And now we're going to focus on the cultural tradition of classical Greece and their search for a rational order. Classical Greece did not create any enduring religious traditions. That a system of polytheism and fertility cults and so on that remained. Now, Greek intellectuals abandoned their mythological framework. The world is a physical reality governed by natural laws as opposed to the gods, and the humans can understand those laws. And human reason can work out a system for living an ethical life. And, perhaps this was caused by diversity and incoherence of mythology and the intellectual stimulation of great civilizations, and the possible influence of the growing role of law in Athenian political life. And so theirs was based primarily on questions, not answers. The Greek way of knowing. This flourished around 600 to 300 B.C.E., about the same time that the city-states flourished. Athens and Sparta, many of those. The key element was the way the questions were asked. Argument, logic, questioning of reasoned wisdom. And the best example is Socrates of Athens, and that's what we were talking about the other day, the Socratic method. So the Greek contribution lay in asking a series of analytical questions about a wide variety of issues rather than proclaiming authoritative answers. And this is the know-all and the end-all. And like I said, the best example is Socrates. It's constant questioning of assumptions, but this was a huge conflict with city authorities over Athenian democracy. And like I said, he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens and therefore sentenced to exile. He refused exile and chose poison, so he was sentenced to death. And some of the earliest classical Greek thinkers applied rational questioning to nature and applied this to medicine and even applied Greek rationalism to understanding human behavior. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were Greece's three greatest thinkers, and it was a succession of teachers and students. Like I said, Socrates taught Plato, who taught Aristotle, who in turn tutored and actually was the teacher of the future Alexander the Great when he was a young boy. And each provided important contributions to Greek thought in regards to the questioning assumption, defining terms and systems, and then cataloging that evidence like I was talking about earlier. And so this is a rational and non-religious analysis of the world. And central to the Greek philosophical contribution was the use of observation and reason to make sense of the complications surrounding life. And their questions and analysis and answers did not rely on religion or leaps of faith or great mysteries. Rather, the world was knowable and information could be obtained. So, there's Herodotus, and he asked, why did the Greeks and Persians fight each other? And Plato outlined his design for an ideal society known as the Republic. And this society had the farmers and the artisans down at, us lowly people down at the bottom. And in the middle tier were the warriors, those that protected society. And then at the top was a ruling class. And in that ruling class, the person with the greatest intellect and insight would rule as a philosopher-king, if you will. And this was established by the academy, an institution of higher learning. And Aristotle was the most complete expression of the Greek way of knowing. Now, many continued the traditional religious beliefs and practices. Greek rationalism spread widely. Like I was explaining earlier, Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander, and that helped Alexander's empire. And the Greeks even influenced the Romans. So Greek thought was spread by Alexander during his dramatic imperial expansion, embraced by the Romans, and as the empire united the whole Mediterranean world, and it was preserved in the Academy in Athens. It was funded by Plato. And the loss and recovery of Greece and Europe. So with the collapse of Rome and early medieval Christianity's hostility towards things pagan, Europe turned toward Greek learning, only to rediscover and embrace it. Gosh, it wasn't until well after the 1100s. And this rediscovery would contribute to the Renaissance and later on the scientific revolution. And so eventually Christian theology was expressed in Greek philosophical terms. And classical Greek texts were preserved in the Byzantine Empire. And the Western Europe neglect of classical scholarship fell after the fall of Rome. And Greek learning then was established in the Islamic world. So if early Christian Europe rejected Greek learning as pagan, where did it survive? Right? In the cities, libraries, and centers of learning in the Islamic world. And here at the geographical crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And it was those Muslim scholars that studied, critiqued, and built upon Greek and Indian and Persian and other international scholarship. And only when medieval Europe engaged with the Muslim world much later during the Crusades was that wisdom brought back to Europe. And here's that image that we talked about yesterday, right? With Socrates here on his deathbed, right? His right arm raised in that lecture motion. This room is completely stripped of furnishings except for this torch and an iron ring anchored up on the wall. You see these men surrounding his bed, all dressed in their tunics. Some are younger, some are a little older. One man is shielding his eyes as he hands Socrates this cup, right, that has the poison in it. Some are listening attentively while others, turn away in horror and bury their faces. They're grieving. There's one man that sits on the bench here. He's just completely dejected by what's going on. View down the hall shows men walking up a staircase. Half-round windows right above the staircase indicate that this is a cellar or, right, maybe a prison of some sort. See the broken shackles on the floor in front of his bed confirm that. Right? And the painting shows the voluntary suicide of Socrates. Right? Of being sentenced to death for corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens. Socrates refused to go into exile to save his life, and he angered many of the city authorities with his willingness to speak truth to power and the value of wisdom and virtue over wealth. And that concludes the cultural tradition of classical Greece.